Fiber evidence is used to create a link between crime and suspect, which means that it's going to be used to help corroborate a story, which means that it can help us place somebody at a crime scene based on circumstantial evidence. Fiber evidence is class evidence, so that means that we can narrow it down to a group. It could originate from different textiles, and a textile could be a carpet, clothing, linens, furniture, insulation, or even rope. And the definition of a textile is actually just a flexible, flat material made by interlacing yarns or threads. Fiber evidence may be transferred directly from the victim to the suspect or vice versa, which would be direct transfer, or it can also be involved in secondary transfer. Only fibers that are not expected to be found at a crime scene would be investigated. So they're not going to start pulling all the fibers up in a carpet just because it's there. But something that is found maybe on a victim that wouldn't be normal or wouldn't be part of where the body was found would be investigated. And within 24 hours, an expected 95% of fiber evidence is actually lost. So when fiber evidence is found, there's some questions that need to be asked. First of all, what type of fiber is it? What is the fiber color? How many of the fibers were found? Where were they found? The textile that the fiber originated from, was it from clothing, a carpet, a rope? Were there multiple fiber transfers? The type of crime that we're looking at, and the time between the crime and the discovery of the fiber. So to collect fiber evidence, there's three things that we can use. We can use forceps, remember those are like tweezers, sticky tape, or special vacuums. There's two tests that we can do on fibers that are actually not going to damage the fiber. The first one is polarizing light microscopy, and it's actually a microscope that has a special filter on it to look at fibers with specific wavelengths of light. And how the fiber appears tells the scientists what it is because they have reference samples, so they know the behavior of light. And natural fibers really only require a regular light microscope. You wouldn't put natural fibers under a polarizing light microscope. And infrared spectroscopy. This process emits a beam that bounces off the material, kind of like radar, and returns to the instrument. And how the beam of light has changed reveals something about the chemical structure of the fiber. And again, there would be reference samples, so the behavior would be compared to the behavior of knowns to decide what it is. And it makes it easy to tell fibers apart that otherwise look alike. So two tests that actually damage fibers. Now we can only do these tests if we have enough evidence. Non-damaging tests can be done on fiber evidence if we only have a small amount. But because these tests damage the fiber, we have to make sure we have large quantities of it. And first we can do a burn test, and we actually place the fibers in a flame and then observe how the fibers react and the residues that are left behind. So sometimes the fibers will melt or they will cease to burn. They stop burning or they continue to burn. Sometimes they leave an ashy black residue or gray residue behind. And we can also dissolve them in chemicals and see the effects in the residues that are left behind with that. So let's compare natural fibers and synthetic fibers. These are the two categories of fibers. So natural fibers are going to be either from animals, plants, or minerals. They could be damaged by microorganisms, and they're not really as strong as synthetic fibers. And synthetic fibers are man-made fibers, but they may actually deteriorate in bright sunlight and they melt at very low temperatures. So you have to keep synthetic fibers away from heat. They're also called regenerated fibers, and they're derived from cellulose. And polymer, remember, is containing many units, whereas a monomer contains just one. So polymer fibers are from petroleum products. So these would be things like plastics. Now, natural fibers are divided into animal, plant, and mineral. And animal fibers are divided into hair, fur, and webbing. So hair examples would be wool, cashmere, or angora. Fur, they're not made into textiles, but you get coats and gloves from them. So they actually take the pelt of the animal and, or, the whole skin and the fur. And then webbing is actually something like silk, and that does not shed easily. So it has some nice qualities. Plant fibers, you're looking at taking seeds, fruits, stems, and leaves and turning them into fibers that we can spin into textiles. And some of them have a very loose arrangement. Some of them are cellulose or polymer. They're monomers of glucose. So basically, it's those sugars that are stacked together to make a complex, nice, hard material. And some examples would be hemp, jute, flax, cotton, and manila. And mineral fibers are mined. They're neither protein nor cellulose, and they would be things like fiberglass and asbestos. Synthetic fibers, there's just four examples of them. We have polyester, nylon, acrylic, and olefins. And polyester you find in like polar fleece and wrinkle-resistant pants. And a lot of times we add polyester to other fibers or natural fibers so that it gives them some strength. Nylon is kind of similar to polyester, but it's easily broken down by light and acid. And acrylic, you tend to find that in things like artificial wool or imitation fur, but it tends to ball or pill easily and it's very inexpensive. And olefins are found in high performance clothing and they're quick drying and resistant to wear. So looking at the natural fibers and some specific characteristics, cotton is going to have a flattened hose appearance if you look at it under a microscope. The fibers can be up to 2 inches long and they taper to a blunt point, almost like hair that you'd find on your legs. It may have a frayed root and has a hollow core that's not always visible. Flax is another natural fiber. It kind of has a bamboo stick appearance. It's straight with angles and not very curved. And you find nodes which look like an X every inch or so. And a lot of times you'll find them in bundles. Silk does not taper, but there's small variations in the diameter. Remember that this, is a webbing. It's from an organism, and it may be paired with another fiber. Typically, you'll find silk with another fiber to give it some more strength, and there's no internal structures. Synthetic fibers vary widely in cross-sectional shape and diameter, and typically they're straight to gentle curves, but they're uniform in diameter. Because they're man-made, they are going to just be very uniform and the same diameter. And they may have surface treatments on them that appear as spots, stains, or pits from the treatment that they undergo to give them strength. So that would be something that would tell us a natural from a synthetic. So some information on textiles. Weaving, okay? In order to create a textile, fibers have to be woven. And in order to do that, you need to have, yarns and threads. So threads, remember, are going to be, fibers that are spun together, and those are going to be spun together some more to make yarns. And there's different patterns that are used for different textiles and have different strengths. So, there's different weave patterns, and according to those, it will give, it'll be used for certain materials because of its ability to withhold. Um, somewhere. Now, satin is actually a weave pattern. It's not a fiber. And thread count is important because it's actually the number of threads per inch. And we hear thread count a lot when we talk about sheets. You hear 200 thread count, 400, 600, 800. And the higher you go in thread count, the pricier the sheets are because, well, they feel nice and soft. But it's because there's actually more threads per square inch. In that thread count, and that's how it's done. So you actually could take a magnifying glass that's 1 inch by 1 inch, and you count the number of threads in that inch, and that's your thread count. So fibers can be pretty useful to corroborate evidence, having some knowledge about where they come from, and they can be used not to just convict, but again, to place somebody at the crime scene. For example, the Wayne Williams trial, they found a unique green carpet fiber that was attached to the bodies that they traced back to the textile and found out that he had the same carpet. So it put the children in Wayne Williams's home so that they were able to narrow down location, and because the carpet was so rare, they were able to narrow down the suspect.